Hello and welcome to the sixth episode of Media Matters 2020, web talks organized by the Department of Mass Communication, Journalism here at St. Xavier's College. For this episode, we have with us Aishwarya S. Iyer, telling stories no one else is willing to tell. To tell you a little more about our speaker today, speaker Aishwarya S. Iyer is a senior correspondent at The Quint. She covers communalism, minority affairs, and right wing for digital newsroom, that is The Quint, based in Noida. From being a ground zero during the Northeast Delhi riots recently to rigorous reporting on what developments after, she thrives in keeping on track of what's happening in everyday life in its aftermath. She has been known for covering a lot of cases, very sensitive cases too. She covered several cases of lynching in India. She also covered the violence at the various anti-CA protests in Uttar Pradesh. She has broken several stories in these and other cases, including the Unnao and Kathua rape cases, which hit the headlines across the country. Previously, she worked as the reporter researcher on the award-winning documentary show Truth vs. Hype on NDTV 24/7. She's a proud alumni of the prestigious Indian Institute of Journalism and New Media. Aishwarya, I welcome you to Media Matters, and I'm also thankful to you for accepting our invitation to be here in spite of a busy schedule.
Thank you so much, Anvil, for inviting me and for making me part of the series of talks that you had for your students. And I hope that whatever I do in the next 20 minutes helps them. But yeah, of course, I'm going to be talking for about 20 minutes, and we've discussed what we are going to talk about. We will open the floor to questions. So please write your questions down. You can put it in the chat box as well.
Yes.
This question answer part is the most fun and the most interactive part of any talk. So should I start?
Yes, Aishwarya, all over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so Aishwarya Iyer work with the Quint, and a little bit about what the Quint is and what it does compared to what other media organizations do or don't do. So the Quint is a digital. It's a digital platform, right? It's not a newspaper. It's not a TV channel, which means you don't have to fill bulletins. Bulletins are basically bulletins have to come on TV and say something. Or a newspaper where you need to fill the page with news so that people can read. So 12, 16, 36 pages of newspaper to every day. Working for the Quint is different because we don't have deadlines. We don't have to fill any space. So we're at a place, the reporters at the Quint are in a very, very fortunate position. So it's been a very satisfying place to work at because, you get to work on your stories. You get to fight for your stories. You get to tell your editors that I need some more days to work on this. You get to enhance it with stronger opinions, with experts, with data, with several visits, with waiting for people to respond to the allegations, which are so very, very important part of any kind of reporting is not, is to get everyone to respond. So all sides are there. So we get to do that. But other than that, it's a younger medium. We're a very young newsroom. So we tend to do a lot of interesting storytelling. We have a Quint lab. Actually, even right now, our website is being changed again because we are very aware of the way people want to consume news. So we keep taking feedback. In a week, the layout of the Quint is going to change. So there's always constant innovation happening at the Quint, even in forms of storytelling. For example, there's this really cool innovation, a tool that we have at the Quint, where if you're watching a video and say, for example, the video says about the Northeast Delhi riots as to what happened on 23rd Feb, then 24th Feb, then 25th day breakdown. And if you want to know what happened on 25th Feb, then there's a way to just skip to that part of the video rather than hearing the whole thing. So we're a very user-friendly medium like that. We try to understand what people want. Lots of videos, lots of infographics, illustrations. We have a fantastic illustrations team. We have a fantastic news videos producers team who churn out videos very, very fast. Our videos have a different layout. It's not very newsy. We use illustrations. We use We use various different tools which resonate, I feel, with a younger audience, and that's where we get our views from. Our main viewership is from say 15 to 18 to say about 35 to 40, which is a very very young audience for news. Hey, sorry. Yeah. So that is what I mean. If I had to summarize, that's what the Quint does that other media organizations don't. We keep trying to innovate. We keep trying to, like, our website. It keeps getting remodeled. Different forms of storytelling. Even like Mojo, which is mobile journalism. Like, I think we've been the pioneers of it in so many ways. I've never traveled for a story with a camera person. I feel like traveling with a camera person is not something that I should even be asking. Like it's a privilege, because resources are very scarce, and in this day and age, you should know everything. So as a reporter, I know how to shoot, I know how to take photos, I know how to do basic edits on my own phone. It's called, Adobe has a phone app called Push. So these are, skills that you definitely should know. How to use Twitter. Twitter is important. Twitter is where news breaks first, and I really didn't like Twitter. Like, I remember the first 3 years of my professional career, I didn't understand the big deal about it. Though seniors would keep telling me tweet your stories and all of that. And now I understand how important it is to verify news and to be on top of things, which is essentially what news is about. So that's regarding what the Quint does. And I'll move now to what are the challenges of being a journalist who covers minority affairs and communalism. I cover communalism and I cover the right wing. So it's not the easiest. It Like, for example, and I'll stick to anecdotes because that'll be the most fun. I just did a story on how RSS members got published last evening. RSS members were arrested for rioting and murder during the Northeast Delhi riots. It's an exclusive. It's a breaking story. It took me about 4 or 5 days to do the story, from writing the testimonies down. These are all like written complaints by people who named people, and not said they are from the Sangh, but just named that X, Y, and Z did this, and this. They were hurling petrol bombs, they were abusing gas, they were rioting, they were threatening. What the son said that one of them shot his father, and his father eventually died 2 hours later at GTP Hospital, which is in Northeast Delhi. And so we got the complaints. Then I spoke to the complainant. We got the FIR. We got to know a charge sheet is filed. We reached out to the accused. And then we found out how all of them, very meticulously, they are from the Sangh, local Shaka members of the Sangh. And we also reached out to the RSS, the Delhi RSS, for a comment. And because I cover the right, I did know who to reach out to. And I did have some, equation with him so that he doesn't rubbish me off and he doesn't not respond to me. So it was great to have that equation with him. And he told me about, he responded, he took a day or 24 hours, but it was definitely worth waiting 24 hours, even though we had all the confirmations we needed. He responded with 3 pages regarding the allegations, the Sangh, and we added that to the story. And, like, storytelling it's not very easy to cover minority affairs and communism, because people tend to think that people are just thinking that, you're biased, or they're saying, no, this is what everybody says, this is what the Quint does. So it's very important, especially where your headline is RSS members arrested for rioting and murder in the Northeast Delhi riots. It's very, very important that you do your due diligence as a reporter. You have to do comprehensive reporting. You have to be objective. You have to make sure all sides are there. So this is the first time in my life that I did not sleep properly at night while doing a story, because I was very aware that I'm going to be doing a story that might lead to more anger, that might lead to more reactions, that might lead to poisoning this communal environment in India, in Delhi at least. And I was very, very, very aware of it, which is why we took so much time, which is why we made sure we reached out to everyone possible before we put the story out. So I feel like when it comes to minority affairs and communalism specifically, it's very hard because, like, even in the Northeast Delhi riots, like, of course, the majority, like 2/3 of the deaths were Muslims, but 1/3 were Hindus. So communalism is not just focusing on Muslims, it's also focusing on Hindus with the same amount of humanity, with the same amount of objectivity and empathy that you would with a case of a Hindu person who was killed, brutally killed, because the same families, they're going through the same pain and agony. And, we done, even during the riots, we did a story on a Hindu man being killed, and the son saw his father being beaten up repeatedly, and he was just lying down, but the mob kept hitting his father, thinking that he was still alive. And he took his father's limping body on a bike, and there's a video of the violence and of the fire next to him. It's unspeakable what he must have gone through. So yeah, it was just the empathy. So it's not so much only about covering what Muslims are going through. It's also about what whatever's happening in a communal setup. They are communal riots, right? So you can't just say communal is only covering what minority communities are feeling. It's also the impact of communalism, the impact of that poison, which also can be the majority community, their property getting burnt, or them losing their loved ones. So that's a very, very important learning, that you don't shut yourself out to those stories, because even those are gross human rights violations. Other than that, how difficult is it to report during the ongoing pandemic? It's very difficult because you can't step out easily. I live with my mother, so I am concerned that I don't want to be the reason that she gets coronavirus. Like, that's just not something that I can live with. I lost my father last year. He died after suffering from an illness for a couple of years. So I'm very, very. It's my mom, so no way. So to be very careful when you're stepping out. It's like you're on battleground. So you have to take. You guys are so lucky in Goa that it's primarily in a green zone for the longest time, and I hope that hasn't changed in the last few days. But Delhi is a very, very horrible situation. We've surpassed Mumbai in the number of cases we have. I don't know what we are doing in terms of handling it. I'm glad we have health reporters who are looking at that. But my job is to cover my beat. So you have to go out with shoe covers, with masks, with gloves, however uncomfortable it is. It's extremely uncomfortable. Cannot touch your face. Make sure there's distance. And I don't think I was as careful on one or two occasions, but of course you understand that, you cannot take a chance with things like this anymore. So it's a different kind of challenge. Things are not as accessible. That doesn't mean reporting can't happen. It can happen. It just has to happen in a more, you have to be more sensitive, more aware of yourself, what you're doing, what you're not doing, aware in the sense of even where your hands are going, which is not something we cared about earlier, right? But now we have to. So it takes a while to mentally accustom yourself to these changes, but it's a lot of fun. A lot of it happens on the phone. For example, this Muslim man had committed suicide in Himachal, in a village in Himachal. Because everybody accused him of giving corona to the villagers, and he actually didn't have corona. He tested negative for corona. After testing negative for corona, within 24 hours, he slit both his wrists and he hung himself to death in a village in Himachal. And I wanted to do the story, and no one had done a human interest, because obviously it's not easy to reach out, right? And even the local reporters there, they're not willing to step out, and you're no one to tell them to step out, right? They don't want to take the risk. They don't want to take the risk. No matter what, you can't ask anything else of them. So I literally went onto the website. I went to Himachal Pradesh government. I found some district mandi number. From there, I found the Kotwali number, which is the police station. And from there, I found the Sarpanch ka number, who's the village headman. And from there, I found the family number. So it was a lot of fun, to go boom, 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 boom like that. It's not like stories can't happen. You just have to be more innovative in how you're doing it. For example, another one is in Punjab, in Patlawa village, where there were at least 30 cases of coronavirus. This is in the beginning of the lockdown. And Punjab has the highest number of NRIs in India. So they had a lot of people coming from Italy and Germany. So my job was to see kya ho raha hai is gaon mein, because the village had been shut down. And yeah, I couldn't find. Oh yeah, so none of my local sources in Punjab could give me any number from the village. They didn't have the Sarpanch number. They didn't have anything. So I went on to Google and I just wrote Patlawa village shop contact number. And I got this Chakki store, which is this Aate ki Chakki ka store ka number. So I called him and I started talking to him. He picked up. And then he started giving me information. And I said, can you send me a few pictures of the village for my story? And he did that. He explained to me how the village is working under shutdown, how, what he's heard about how people got corona. And, there was this one very old man who died eventually. The first guy, it was called the super spreader, which I feel is a very derogatory word to use for people. And I'm not okay with that. But he gave it to, he came from Italy and Germany, and then his family got it, the Sarpanch got it, the other people in the village got it. And he was a Granthi. He used to read the Guru Granth Sahib in the Gurudwara. So that's a very public place. And so yeah, we did the story, and from this Chucky store guy, I got the number of the Sarpanch, and then the family, and that's how the story was done. And I would keep asking them, please send me photos. And I remember this Sardar, from the village, and I told him, "Apna ek photo bhej dijiye," and he sent me a picture of his selfie of himself with like a cow, and I had to be like, "Aisa photo nahi, matlab thoda normal photo bhijiye." And then he did that. So it's a lot of fun. Initially it was frustrating. It still is on certain occasions, but mostly it's a lot of fun. Because it's a different kind of challenge. It's not like you can't report. You just have to be careful on the field, and you have to be smart in getting your work done. And I think that's a fun challenge to have. Have I been threatened or pressurized by authorities? Not when you say authorities, I not by the police directly or the government directly, but like for this RSS story, one of them is currently a vice president of the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, and named him, but the PhD senior did was very, I don't even know what word to use. He was very like, this is not something you should be doing, and it was. I mean, I understand where he's coming from, right? Because I have to, and I have to work with him in the future. So there's no way I can burn those bridges or anything. So I let him talk. I let him say what he said. I heard him out, and then I said, "Okay, sir, thank you," and I cut the phone. I didn't react at all, but he was pretty clear that I shouldn't be doing this. But yeah, you have to sort of just be respectful. Don't lose your mind. Don't get angry. Don't get hassled. Don't retort. Just listen and do what you want. Other than that, yeah, lots of other times when there are rape accused involved and all of that, and like the first thing I do when I go to meet a rape accused, for example, in the Muzaffarnagar riots aftermath, the first thing I do is go into the family and hang out with all the women. I become the gudiya of the house in no time. And I'll eat with them, and I remember they made something called raski, which is basically gai ka doodh and rice with sugarcane juice, and it really wasn't yummy. But I drank it up, and I was just there. And once you have them on your side, and then you talk to the family, and then once the camera comes up, you were very, very curt. When the camera goes down, don't run. Stay there. Say, mujhe ek aur, and I said, ki mujhe ek aur chai mil sakti hai kya? They gave me another cup of chai. I was alone, by the way. All these things I report alone. As I said, having a camera person is a privilege, which I will never ask for because I need to be self-sufficient. And yeah, it was great fun. So yeah, you have to be careful. There are days where I have not approached somebody because I know he's at home and he's not picking up my call, and it's too scary. But it's okay. And the last question, like the last thing I want to touch upon before we open up to questions, and I hope you guys have questions, is that your first-hand experience covering Delhi riots and the aftermath. I was on the floor, on the ground on the 24th of February. 23rd is where the first signs of violence started in Delhi, Northeast Delhi, in Moshpur, Jafrabad. There was stone pelting that happened after Kapil Mishra had given his speech regarding saying that, if they don't move in 3 days, we will move them ourselves, with a DCP standing next to him, of course. And I had just gone to see what happened on 23rd. My office was actually not very insistent I go. They were like, because I had to do another documentary. I'm still working on a documentary regarding all these rape cases in Banda. Banda is a district in southern UP. It's on the border with Chitrakoot. So I had traveled there for 4-5 days. Very, very strong documentary coming out. So I had to work on that. This is back in Feb. And he's like, we'll just do this. And I was like, let me just go and see what happened and file a moot copy on what happened the day before. Because Shaheen Bagh, Shaheen Bagh and Jamia in Delhi, which is in southern areas of Delhi, people came and shot and all of that, but nothing happened. But there was violence, there was like stone pelting, there were injuries. So why did that happen in Northeast Delhi? I was very curious. So I went, and in front of me, the first, like we were talking and we were all trying to do what happened on 23rd. So I was talking to women and all of that. And in front of me, I saw the first auto be set on fire. So we saw this smoke. Then people started losing it, and then there was stone pelting, then there was tear gas, and our eyes were also hurting. So people were giving us salt. We were standing right there shooting, but at the same time, people were paranoid about us shooting, right? About me shooting, because they don't want their faces to be visible. And whatever you say to them, they're not going to listen. So they were very aggressive. So what I was doing was I was shooting on my cell phone, and I put my office phone above. So even if they found the phone, if they really wanted to take my phone away, they wouldn't find my phone, which had the footage. They would find the office phone. So that's the presence of mind thing that you should do. Standing on the corner, asking people if I can shoot before I shoot them. So this guy whose car was burnt, the second car was a white car. I've taken a picture of this, and I'll never forget what I saw. And I took a video of him, and he was willing to talk on camera. And then people got really angry seeing I'm shooting. So again, I had to say, no, he's given me permission, he's given me permission. But people were really angry and all of that. And then I crossed over to the other side, which was the pro CA side, primarily Hindus. People were very nice to me even there. And I mean, of course, people were on edge, which is understandable, right? Because shit is going down and you don't want there to be evidence of yourself being involved. But I never had the kind of experiences other people had in the Northeast Delhi riots, where their phones were snatched from them, or like footage was deleted, or anything like that, or they were threatened. Nothing like that happened to me. I was very like, I would be, there's a presence of mind that's important. And of course, what happened with them is terrible. But I feel like there's certain times you can do what you do. There's certain times where your eyes are enough because you're on ground zero and you don't need to antagonize people, right? So you need to be smart. You need to be careful of yourself. But I never had I was there for 3 days. We saw the mosque with the Jai Shri Ram flag on it, which was just depressing. We were there. Yeah, you just have to be careful. You have to be careful. You have to make sure you're not hurting anyone. And even, in the aftermath, I'm going to take 3-4 more minutes. The aftermath of the riots had a lot to do with the charge sheets, right? So 750, sorry, over 750 FIRs have been filed. That's a lot of FIRs, which means there's a lot of charge sheets. What are charge sheets? After an FIR is filed, the police has to complete investigation in about 3 months. They have to present a charge sheet. You can produce 3 kinds of investigative reports. One is a charge sheet where you're saying X, where you're naming accused and you're giving evidence against them. Okay. Second is a suspect report, which is you say I don't have enough evidence against them, but you leave it on the judge. The judge can ask the police to reinvestigate, or the judge can throw the case out, but the police leaves it on the judge. And the third is a closure report, that this case is absolutely bogus and we close it. Now, of course, for the Delhi violence cases, second and third is not going to happen. Police is under a lot of pressure to provide a narrative and whatever, do what they have to do. So they're all charge sheets. I've got a charge sheet even today, which I will be going through. It's not being reported anywhere. The Quint has been, and I can say this with complete sincerity, the Quint has been in the forefront of breaking stories in the aftermath of the Northeast Delhi riots. Whether it's RSS members getting arrested, whether it's BJP leaders not getting arrested despite several complaints against them, a former MLA who's been named in a number of complaints, Kapil Mishra left out of the chronology. What he said was a very, very big point of contention. And I can say this because I went there and I saw how people were hassled about what Kapil Mishra had said on the 23rd. And I saw how Hindus were emboldened by what Kapil Mishra had said on the 23rd, right? So yeah, it was problematic. So we've been at the forefront. Please log on to the Quint, or I'm Aishwarya S. Iyer on Twitter to see the kind of stories that we are doing. If there are things that you think we should be covering also, but we have like work churned out for the next 2-3 weeks, and it's been very, very interesting with Corona, with the lockdown, with reaching out, with being sensitive, with holding back identities, with making sure we have all sides. It's been an immense learning experience, nothing like I've ever done before. I'm very, very proud of the work that the Quint is doing regarding this, and I hope you guys have read our reports. But yeah, that essentially is. I think I've covered all my points. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for giving us such an insightful information about what actually went in Delhi and other stuff. We have a couple of questions already in the chat box, but let me begin with asking you one very fundamental question. I just understood that from the fact that you spoke to us now, what you're doing is not easy. And I think, given a chance to any journalist, would never want to pick up this arena of getting into reporting on communalism, rape, all these issues, because these are very challenging issues. What inspired you? What made you to get into this kind of a beat?
So I've always wanted to be a reporter, but of course you learn things about yourself over time. Um, I think it was my first big case was Alimuddin Ansari. He was lynched to death in September 2017, and I had gone to Jharkhand to meet his family. And I think what I like about reporting on communalism and minority affairs is that you're inspired. You have to be inspired by what you see to write with empathy, to write with heart, to write with a sense of objectivity as well. Because the same report, two reporters can go to the spot and come back, and their reports can be very, very different. It's very, very important to be there, to focus on the mood, to focus on everything that you're experiencing, the animosity, the anger. Like, for example, the Alimuddin Ansari story, I remember what struck me the most is that they kept telling me that, no Hindus had a problem with him at all in the village. And this is when prayer meetings are happening and people are coming, the relatives are coming in and out of the house. And I kept telling them, can you call a Hindu from the village, who I'd like to talk to them about what they remember of Alimuddin Ansari. I'd like to include this angle in my story, maybe even do it as a separate one, right? Depending on what I hear. For about 3 to 4 hours that I was there, more, at least 4 hours that I was there, they were not able to get anyone from the village to talk to me. And I think that silence was just heartbreaking, And of course, after the point, I stopped pressing. So I think it's these nuanced things that really inspire me to report on this. It's a very, very relevant beat in India today. It's a very, very things are constantly changing, especially with this government in power. And I feel like I feel like I have a also you have to be in touch with a lot of NGOs. You have to be in touch with a lot of ground workers who get to know about these. Like I just got to know there was a case of lynching in Bharatpur, Rajasthan. So I'm trying to verify what 2 men cow related lynching that has happened. So I'm trying to already reach out to some local NGOs who know about the family or are trying to help the family in some way or the other. And then, so I think what you have to do is you have to be very, very inspired. And I feel like I'm inspired, at least till now. I don't know how long I'll be this inspired, but I feel very inspired by what I do, which is why I think I'm very excited. It's not scary. It's not, it's not scary. It's not like, oh my God, what am I doing? Because, you're reporting. At the end of the day, I'm reporting. My job is to get a fantastic story out, So whatever's happening, like, of course, it takes a toll on you on some level. But also at the same time, you're also very, I have to get a good story out of this. That is my purpose. So I think I have that sense of balance also, which is why I keep going back to doing these stories.
All right. We'll take a couple of questions from the chat box, but before that, there are two things here. It's your dream, it's your inspiration. You are inspired to write on the stories. That's one thing. But what happens and how do you deal with the situation when you see your stories? You have done a great work. You've got all the angles, but you don't get justice for those people in the stories. You see those people. You've written about rape accused. You have written about the lynching cases, but these guys are still anguishing or waiting for the justice even today. I mean, I could name so many cases. The Kathua, okay, the case, they're still waiting for justice. So, what does it make the writer, especially in your case, you? How do you deal with it?
So the Kathua case, the trial court has delivered the verdict. Most of the accused are in jail, and I followed that till the end actually, because it was a very big case. The trial finished within a year. In Pathankot, I was there for the trial court verdict and felt elated. But the other example, see, for example, I'd gone to Hyderabad for that Priyanka Reddy rape murder case, where 4 men were picked up. They raped her and they murdered her. This is the veterinary doctor, in November last year, if I'm not wrong. And it was my off weekend, I remember, because I had planned to meet people, and my boss said, "You go, Aishwarya." And even though they could have sent someone from Mumbai, which was the original plan because it's cheaper or whatever, but ma'am said go. So I said, of course I went. And I did a story on all the accused, and I come back to Delhi and I get to know that they've all been encountered. They're all just killed, and people are doing it, and people are celebrating it. And I remember calling the and they were crying and howling on the phone to me, and I didn't know what to say. And it broke my heart. And my office asked me, "Do you want to go back?" And I said no, because it was a heartbreaking story. And I was like, "I'll get everything I need to from here." So I got videos, I got them on call, I put out stories. I did it much faster than I would have, if I had to travel and all of that. But it was heartbreaking. Even today, I don't know how they're surviving. We're going to be doing a follow-up 6 months to it, but it's depressing. And yeah, I do get demotivated. I sent my bosses to my I sent emails to my bosses saying, I'm very demotivated. What do I do? Because I get demotivated, and it's natural to get demotivated, right? Police is not going to do their job. The judges are not going to do their job. Like, now I've been in the profession enough to know that this is a systematic issue, right? And so yeah, I mean, I told them I'm demotivated, and then they called me and they said exactly what you said. Very often you're reporting on something, your job is to report and be as honest about it. And I know it's easier said than done, but you have to tell yourself, "Ki, this is my responsibility." You can't take more on yourself than you need to. You are not the law. You are not the police. You're a tiny speck in this world who is trying very hard to make a difference in someone's life. Um, in one or two cases, like Kathua, I feel very great that it finally led to conviction. Because I saw the poison in that village. Yeah, it was harrowing. And even the Tabriz Ansari case, I don't know if you guys know, but I broke the story regarding the murder charge being dropped from the charge sheet in the Tabriz Ansari lynching case from Jharkhand. And I got it and I broke it, and then Indian Express had it 3-4 days later. Times Now had it 2 days later, and it led to a full thing where the murder charge was reinstated. There is a video of this guy being lynched, or being tied to a pole and being beaten for hours, and you're telling me murder cannot be a charge? They're hitting him on his head. Any normal human rights lawyer will tell you murder is an obvious charge. The police dropped it, but we got it back. So I feel like you hold these small victories close to heart, and you have to. The Kathua rape victim's father still calls me. His somebody in his family has taken money away that was donated to him by all of us. They've taken 10 lakh of it away. So he keeps calling me and like complaining about it. But what can I do? He wants me to come to Kathua and do a story on it, investigate the matter. I can't go and meet his relatives and say, "Why did you take the money?" Right? Like, it's awkward. So I would get very hassled. Why is he calling me every day? I feel bad also. But then eventually you have to help him as much as you can, and at the same time take a step back and accept that there's only so much you do, which is it's an on and off thing. Yeah, you feel demotivated for sure, but then you have to push yourself.
Very true. Okay, we'll take the first question. This is by Unbeatable Combi. I think this is my professor from Mangalore, St. Elisha's College, Vishal Naik. His question is, covering minority stories is not easy. You always have people telling you, don't get into this mess of politics. How do you deal with such comments? And I think just to add on to it, until some time back, it was narrative, go to Pakistan, anti-Pakistan. Now it is, you're a Chinese agent, go to China. So a lot of this comment, how do you deal with this comments? Because I'm sure being trolled on Twitter today is a normal thing for a journalist.
Yeah, it really is. And they're so mean. Sometimes they're too mean, yeah. Like, they'll be like, "Oh my God, we're still alive. Like, how have you not been rated?" And you're like, "Dude, they're messaging my sister now. They're messaging my sister things like, how can you be related to your sister? And, my sister should die." And my sister is getting hassled. My mother is constantly paranoid, with all the stories I'm doing. She's like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And all. And I'm like, "Relax. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing." Always, I'm the rebel kid in the house who ended up doing things right, or making them slightly proud. I'd like to think. Vishal, sir, thank you so much for your question. I'm so glad you took the time to be here. Sir, I feel like it's my job. I cover this beat. All I need to do is put those opinions forward, and of course, people are going to say that people are going to say what they say, and the only thing I can do is be as diligent as I possibly can. Like very often, I feel like, and I'll be very honest about this. A lot of times, my editors try to editorialize my pieces. They'll add opinion. I'm very against that. I will remove those lines. I will tell them, or sometimes not tell them. Between us, this stays in this Google Meet talk. But I will remove those lines because I just feel like, you know, no, because we cannot editorialize. We cannot make sweeping judgments. But I think I just ignore it. I ignore it, and now it's become very regular, and I'm sort of used to it. Initially, it would really take a toll on me. I would uninstall Twitter. I would block people. I would scream at people. Now I've realized that this is the way life is going to be. So I'm just very true to my, as I said, if like for in the Northeast Delhi riots where Hindus have also died, I make sure that we do that with the same level of empathy that we would do anyone with any other story. And I take that responsibility very, very seriously. So when we do those stories, people are like, wow, how is the Queen doing this? And I'm like, we're doing this because it's the truth. We'll report what's happening. So yeah, I'm not trying to change their perception, but you have to ignore them after the point that this is going to happen. And I have to say there's a lot of appreciation also. There's a lot of
Okay.
appreciation, which is also more than makes up for it often.
All right. We have a next question from Viola Rose. The pandemic threw most journalists India coming up with innovative ways of ground reporting. Have we also changed the narrative style in reporting? Isn't there a need for positive and humanitarian stories during pandemic? Taking case of Tablighi Jamaat coverage by mainstream media, do you think journalists handled it properly? So I think there are a couple of questions. Should there be more humanitarian and positive stories? And what is your take on how the Tablighi Jamaat coverage took place just during the lockdown?
Yeah. So regarding positive stories, yeah, I wish there was more good news that we could report on from my field. I can talk about my field. Are more, we do stories on Samaritans who are helping people during COVID, who are donating money, who are making food, who are donating PPE kits. So we do that. I don't, but the Quint does that. Because yeah, there is definitely an audience like you, Bella Rose, who really want to hear good news, and they don't like the whole negativity. So yes, we need good news, but for that we also need good judgments from Supreme Courts and district courts and high courts. We also need the police to behave in a more just fashion. We also need people to be more compassionate. So yeah, when those things happen, those things happen. So for example, we've done stories on Hindu-Muslim unity also during the Northeast Delhi riots, which are good, happy stories to do, which you remember. It's a beautiful story actually. Spread Hindu-Muslim unity, the Quint. You'll get it. You'll get the story link. It's a video story. And these aunties are coming to rescue of this man whose shop was vandalized, and so we do that as all. Like I will never not do a good news story. Or I did a story during the riot, during the lockdown, about these the four migrant workers who struggled but were able to get their cycles along with them. They were being taken in these Shramik trains. They wanted to take their cycles with them, and the authorities are like, "What is this cycles leke ja rahe hain?" Anyway, they feel like they're behaving like gods with these laborers by even giving them transport to go home. But these guys wanted to take their cycles home. They were like, we've spent so much money, 2,500 rupees, 4,000 rupees. Our family sent us money from home for this. We were going to cycle back home. Why should we just leave it here? And all, they fought their way and they got their cycles back with them to Bihar. And that was such a beautiful story of resilience and just hard work, or just trying to find a way out. And I'm so proud of them. So we did that too. It was a very happy story. So we do, but of course, there's always more space for this. Tablighi Jamaat, yes, I've been on top of it. Not only from the whole Nizamuddin end of March drama, the politicization of it, but even after, they were kept in quarantine centers for 2 months. No, for a month, when the quarantine period was 48 days, for over a month. We were the first people to break the story on why they are still being kept there after being tested negative twice. Why are they not going? And they would tell us that the MHA has not given us orders. Why does the MHA have to give orders for who's in a Delhi quarantine center? and Delhi government are constantly fighting with each other, which is another saga, which is just frustrating. Which is why I think the Corona situation is as bad as it is. But the Tablighi Jamaat has been handled so badly, but I remember, I've been in touch. I was in touch with them while they were in jail. I also did a very good story. I'm sorry, I'm saying very good, but I'm very proud of the story. I'll tell you why. In a UP temporary jail. So UP had made temporary jails for Tablighi Jamaat members for like these small sections, not small sections, whatever, like sections that involve up to 2 years of imprisonment. And a pregnant woman called Rizwana Begum, she still calls me today, and she's really adorable. She gives me too much more credit than I deserve. She suffered a miscarriage in this UP temporary jail in Lucknow, and she was not shown to a doctor for 3 days. And because of our story, within 10 hours, they got permit to go back to their homes in Guntur district of Andhra Pradesh. No other reporter could even follow up because they were already on a bus back. So yeah, it's not been reported well, but at the same time, you can just do what you do. A colleague of mine has done a super video. It's on my timeline on Twitter regarding how the people from Nizamuddin, where the Markaz is, and I was at the Markaz actually 3 days ago. We are doing a story on the Markaz as well. And we went there and people were telling us, how they are not getting jobs, how they're not getting customers, how their shops are still closed. Beautiful video done on the aftermath of it. So all we can do, Velrose, is that we can just report as honestly as possible. And just because propaganda is happening, you can't fight it now. You can't fight how the Republic or Times Now or India Today or anyone else report. But you can only control how you yourself report. So we're just doing our bit because it's not enough. But that's all we can do.
Okay, is there another question by the unbeatable? I'm sorry, I got his name wrong. It's Carlos Luis. Extremely sorry, Carlos.
Not Belarus.
Okay, his question. No, the first question was by unbeatable Combi. He's Carlos. I called him as Vishal. I'm sorry, my mistake. His question again. But when you are covering stories such as these, there are people who don't want to say. Sorry. There are people who do not want to say anything about these issues. Just as you said, how do you motivate yourself and still go ahead, get the information on the story, and then verify the information you get, giving the pandemic fears of stepping out of the house? So I think he's asking, because you said previously also, and I know you from the fact that when we met you in Delhi, you want to go on the girl. With this pandemic, you probably do not have that kind of a luxury. How do you still verify the stories? How do you get people to motivate to speak on these issues?
Motivate anyone to speak. It is not my job as a reporter to motivate anyone. I think that's a very thin line of like, no. The moment you sense someone doesn't want to speak, you move away. You ask them, what we can make it anonymous. We can shoot you we can change your voice. We can shoot you in silhouette. Then I can guarantee you, I will send them clips of how I've tried to, how I have ensure that people's identity is not exposed. All that I'll do. But we'll change your name. So we'll only mention your age and the area you live, but we'll change your name. Some things like that you can say, but that's it. You find another person to tell you that information. You find someone else who's willing to talk. You don't motivate anyone. You don't encourage any. Motivate is like totally 100% zero. No. You don't even encourage anyone to talk. You just ask them and you tell them, sir, this is the situation. Are you comfortable?
Okay.
Not comfortable. And you can also, of course, say, if you think about it and get back to me. So a day later, you call them again. Sir, did you think about it? And very often, people are just touched by your sincerity. And then they'll agree. They'll believe like, okay, I understand. Or you send them the stories you've done so that they know who you are. Because why should they open up to you, right? You are just some reporter calling them for the first time and you want to know intrusive details about their life. So who are you? You have to do that trust. So little bit you try.
All right. Aaron Fernandez has a question. In your experience of journalism, leaving aside the Delhi riots, do you feel violence against minorities is well planned or are these things happened in the heat of the moment? So I think he's referring to the Delhi riots, or I mean, other than Delhi riots, whether it happened planned. Your take on it?
So I will like first off say I'm not and I'm not feeling reporter, but I am very uncomfortable with like the typing. Even my Twitter will not have the glaring statements about what I think has happened. I am nobody. I'm in this profession for 4.5 years, and that's all I know. From what I saw and what I experienced, it didn't look well planned. It did. There was tension, a bit of tension, and a lot of people were stoking this tension. Um, and police have tried to say with all the anti-PA protesters and the conspiracy was happening since December, which is which I don't know how they will argue this in court. You know, the PDR to show that on the basis of a mobile phone location called record it's called mobile phone location, which is also the basis of the towers around you. They are saying these people were here and they did this conspiracy. That is not enough to prove anything. Um, at the same time, you do have very, very incriminating evidence against BJP leaders, which is not being probed. And that is a fact. You know, that I can say for sure. So was it pre-planned? I don't know. But yeah, a lot of these smaller cases of lynchings, they are pre-planned. Like Alimuddin Ansari was tailed. You know, a target was set on his back. Pehlu Khan also, they were all leaving. It was very close to a fair market, an animal fair market. And that is a point of contention whether you can take the cattle out of this state. This is Haryana and Rajasthan, and there is Mewat. Mewat is where a lot of these lynchings happen, and Mewat is where Muslims are in majority. Been to this area a lot, so there were guys standing there waiting to pounce on people. You know, so these are things that are easy to find and spot. Which people have not done. So, of course, there are lots of cases where you are being tailed or people are giving information on you and, you know, you're being picked up and all of that. But the Delhi riots, what they planned, I really I don't think so. I can't be sure. I don't think so. Because the anger and all was just like so much frustration building up, which was just stoked by people. And when people came and made these statements, then people felt they could do anything. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question, Aaron Fernandez.
Yes. Moving on to the next question from Blossom Fernandez. Question is, can these reports be used as evidence in the court? I'm not sure whether she's referring to the reports from Quint or she's referring to the videos that have been shot by the
I
Quint.
think she's referring to the stories
of the riot. Maybe.
You can tell us in the chat, Blossom, if we are getting you wrong, so that.
Blossom, are you referring to? If you could just tell us if you're referring to the stories or the stories. Yes, she mentioned that stories.
Yeah.
Can the stories be used as evidence in the court?
I hope so. For example, I did this story on how one of the charge sheets says that the conspiracy to have the riots when Donald Trump comes was decided in a meeting on the 8th of January in Shaheen Bagh by Umar Khalid, Khalid Saifi and Tahir Hussain, who are these three people the Delhi police is portraying as masterminds of the riots. Okay, all of them are anti-CA protesters, of course, and big names. I found out. So I was like, 8th Jan, was there even, it started with a query. Was there even information about Trump coming to India on 8th of Jan? And there wasn't. There was no information on 8th of Jan regarding Trump coming to India, and we did a story on it. And then before publishing the story, I, of course, reached out to all the three lawyers, right? Because they should know. These lawyers will not say anything on record, but I have a very good equation with them, whether it's Umar Khalid, Khalid Saifi, whatever. It's my job to let them know कि मैं ये कर रही हूँ, so that you can maybe use it, not use it, whatever, but I need you to know. And they were like, oh my God, we didn't even think of this. We hadn't even come to reading the charge sheet, this and that. And they were very excited actually regarding the story we've done. And I'm hoping it helps them. I'm hoping we do a lot more stories also that can poke holes in these conspiracy theories that the police are constantly looking at it. So the main FIR is FIR 59, which is looking at the conspiracy angle where UAPA is invoked, which is the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. That is the FIR to look out for. That charge sheet for that is going to come out only in the next 3 to 4 months. So there'll be a while before we can start poking holes into that charge sheet. But yeah, definitely these stories can be used in the court of law by the yeah.
All right. Okay. Next question by Shail Devi. Do you find covering your particular beat clashing with your personal beliefs at times? If yes, how do you find a balance between your belief and the content you put out? It may be objective, appealing, and informative to the readers.
Shahil Devi, right?
Shail Devi, yeah.
That's a lovely question. It's making me think. Um, I don't feel like, see, I'm very privileged. Brahmin household, um, have a home, English speaking, all of that. And I know here leads to government officials talking to me. Um, I have sensed casteism right and center in my career. It really, really bothers me. It really bothers me. Um, but when it comes to reporting, which is why I think the most easy example for this would be that Hindu man dying during the riots and a Muslim man dying during the riots. If you read my stories, they're written in the same way, with the same depth, with the same empathy. So no, it's not clashing with my beliefs. Am I secular? Yeah. Am I inherently someone who feels that the Muslims are being persecuted in India? Yeah. Do I feel what he has done? 300 plus. I was at the BJP headquarters when that happened in the 2019 Lok Sabha elections. I was stunned. I felt extremely humbled. Are there things that they are doing that are right? Yes. Will I just say all of them are wrong? No. Will I make those blatant judgments? No. Did I pounce on Modi when the whole China thing happened? No. So yeah, you have to be balanced about your opinion. And as I said earlier also, I feel like sometimes my editor, they do tend to add something in my story that I'm not comfortable with, and I will remove it. So I think till date, I've not felt like anything clashes with my beliefs or like that. Like one example is when the Hindu man was killed, my headline was mob chanting Allahu Akbar killed my father. So the court, it was being used. I wanted to use it. My editor was not comfortable using it. And I was wondering why. Because if I had to put Jai Shri Ram in the headline, I would think twice. I bash Hinduism left, right, and center. So why do I have to be concerned about Allahu Akbar? I didn't like it. So I had a dialogue, internal dialogue. I spoke to other people. And then I was like, okay, there is already a issue, right? Like, you know that the minority is being persecuted. So you want to want to make sure you're not alienating them by doing this story, not disrespecting them. And at the same time, you're putting your point across that a Hindu was killed by a Muslim mob. So how do you do that? So we changed it to they came back to see if we were alive. Hindu man recounts why. And what the brilliant part about that headline was, not only were Hindus sharing it, Muslims were sharing it. Everyone was sharing that, this is wrong and this should not have happened. So yeah, it's very important to posture yourself correctly and not hurt people. So it's an ongoing dialogue, it's ongoing learning. Always open to feedback, by the way. If you ever have done a story where I had a thing of mine, then please do write to me and reach out to me and tell me, and be more than willing to hear what you have to say.
Okay. Okay, that question by Shail Devi was from an international student from Fiji. The next,
Wow, she's from Fiji.
yeah.
That's amazing.
Next question by Dinesh Niravikar. As you mentioned that you have got threatened by several goons while you do your work, I really respect your courageous journalism. If you could give out a brief message to our young budding journalists to take up journalism field as their career.
Okay, sure, Dinesh. I feel like, see, now journalism is not just about reporting on the field, okay? It's also about being good producers. It's about being good editors. A newsroom doesn't only function because of reporters. It functions as important are editors, news editors, video editors, producers, social media people, SEO people, which is basically ensuring that your stories are read online, so that shows keywords are there in your stories. There are lots of different components to making a newsroom thrive. So if you feel like you feel strongly enough for any of these things, like see, journalism is not about, it's not about money. You can say and make a lot of money. Okay. It's about being passionate. So if you have the passion, then just go for it. Extremely satisfying job. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of being recognized. It's a lot of people reaching out to you. It makes you feel good about yourself. So you can help people. And it makes you, that's a very selfish thing that I'm saying, right? It makes you feel good about yourself. But imagine doing that for people once a week or just hearing someone out and saying, I will do everything I can. Please be patient. It means everything. Even producers who put things together. I've worked with such fantastic people at the Quint, who've made my story a reality, including my editors who've spoken to me when I've had dilemmas about putting something out or whatever. So if you feel strongly about any of these aspects of a newsroom, not only reporting, and remember, like I have to say this, reporting is not an assignment that will come to you. You have to earn it. Okay, even my reporting job didn't come to me directly. I was on the desk for Hindustan Times. I was an overexcited kid who would pitch ideas every day and work before and after my shift. So I remember some kids from IIJN had come to the Quint and they were like, they are not letting us report. They come for internships. And I was like, what are you saying? And I interned, I only transcribed. So relax. Don't think कि मुझे reporting ऐसी मिल जाएगी. You have to work hard for it. But yeah, it's a very satisfying, very exciting, very relevant, very important profession. Hope that helps you, Dinesh. Though.
All right. Okay, that was his question for his students. He's a professor at St. Xavier's College.
Right.
All right. So next question is Reveal Electro. I don't think that's his real name, but nonetheless, this is his question. How do you cover terrific kind of stories in the hardest places? How do you make it easy to see and report such kind of stories? I think he's asking you to reveal your secret of how do you get these stories and done.
That's what I'm wondering. How do you answer this question? I don't know. It just happens, yeah. The Katwa story close to my heart. He just didn't want to send me to. He said, I don't know, we are late on this. And I was like, so I sent a mail to all of them. There's time to invest money somewhere right now and all that, okay? And because I was just relentless in saying I want to go, they agreed. They called me into the room. Let's look at this. They agreed. I went to Kathua. Kathua story did fantastically. I came back. 1 year to Kathua. My boss came to me and said, you don't want to go. It's going to be a year. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, draft a plan and go to Jammu. And I was like, sure. Jammu is beautiful. Udhampur and all is really pretty. Beautiful. So I was like, sure. So I went back. And when I went back, I was just walking around the village. And I met this man. He was unassuming. He was a Gaddi, which is a Hindu nomadic tribe that they travel between Himachal and Kathua, Jammu. And between summers and winters. And I was just talking to him. Then I asked him about this girl also. Having heard about this case. He was just middle of nowhere in the village. He was going to get water from some pond. So I was going with him. Because I had some time to kill. I didn't know what to do. He turned around and said, हाँ मुझे पता है. मैंने कहा आपको कैसे पता है? He said मैंने उसकी body ढूंढी थी. So I was like, what? And then I said, क्या? मैंने कहा तो आप पुलिस वगैरह से क्यों नहीं मिलने गए हो? He said, हाँ मुझे बुलाया उन्होंने investigation के लिए. And that's it. I spent the next 1 hour with him. He took me to the area where he found the girl. So we went in trail. But it was so much fun. I think maybe, and nobody had that story. It was an exclusive again. Nobody had ever interviewed this person. Some girl coming from Delhi, finding him was just beautiful, I feel, when the local reporters couldn't. But yeah, you just have to listen. Don't go to the ground with thinking I will do X, Y, and Z. You are not the story. What you are thinking is not the story. What you are hearing and listening, experiencing, that's the story. Open to that, and good stories will come to you. I think that's the magic.
I think it's sometimes being at the right place at the right time also,
Yeah,
as you
and
in
just
the Katwa case.
yeah, some amount of luck also. Yeah.
Sure. Next question by Jonquil Sudhir. What do you do
Sorry,
when
by
the
who?
fact Jonquil Sudhir,
Jonquil Sudhi. Okay.
he was professor at St. Xavier's College. What do you
Okay.
do when the facts you unearth is published and could lead to a communally violent situation?
Oh,
Has it happened before?
I'm sorry.
Where has it happened before where a story may have caused more communal tension or erupted into a riot?
No, definitely not leading to overestimating the power of the Quint. Also, I would rather feel like news channels when they were reporting Jamaat,
Okay.
they are causing a riot with what they because it's not even factual. They're not even putting out facts. So Professor
Okay.
Sudhir, I feel like no, I don't think so. I feel like there has to be a responsibility in the way you put information out. For example, the RSS story I think is the uh, you have to read it, Professor, to understand the amount of the comprehensive work that has gone into it, the understated way it is written in. There is no flair, there is no mood. It is just saying X, Y said this, X said this, Y said this. So I feel like there's a lot of responsibility, but at the same time, you can't not report it. So I think the only way of doing it is reporting it responsibly, which I think the Queen does, which I think I do. Um, yeah, I mean, people are going to get uncomfortable. It's not my purpose to make them uncomfortable by telling them something horrible has happened. But my purpose is to put it out. Because sadly, nobody is doing that. There's just so much propaganda on the other side. No one is just saying things in the most empathetic and simple ways. I think Scroll is, The Wire is. The Wire was a very good friend. She's going back to Northeast Delhi, right? We were just discussing. She was asking me, where do I go and this and that. We were just discussing, and yeah, it was a great. It's great that people are doing that, but so no, I don't feel like any of my stories have two lives. I feel like the propaganda had and has but definitely has a potential to saying that would be an overstatement, and I'm too small to use this. And I also find it very uncomfortable to make these statements. I just feel like restraint helps. So.
All right. The next two, they're not questions, rather, they are comments. One is from Carlos Lewis. He says, thank you for being courageous and getting real stories to us.
Thank you, Carlos.
Ritika Ahuja, it's not a question, rather even again a comment for you. She says, I suppose she says, you shouldn't worry. People get crazy online spaces. They do this a lot of to a lot of journalists like Meghna from News Laundry. I think this is in response to online trolling and what we were discussing previously.
Yeah. Meghna the handles it like a pro. I've met him several times. They have this News Laundry is a aid. We're very good friends. So yeah, we keep going there for podcasts and this and that. And yeah, Meghna is just I love how he handles all the trolling with so much like with humor. I wish I had the knack of doing that. But yeah, I will not take it seriously. Thank you for that.
Anjali Pandey has a question for you. During various conversations today, you mentioned how you kept in touch with the family of victims and sometimes with the victims themselves. Does it get overwhelmed sometimes when you can't help them with more than they expect from you? Is it simply something that you cannot involve yourself in due to drawing a line as a career suggests so? What is the next step then? And do you suggest other organizations that can help them further?
No, I don't reach out to other organizations for help. I don't think that's my job. What I do is there have been times I've given money because someone is just too poor. So from my pocket, already to this or whatever. I have.
All right.
Like in this one case, they were so poor, and she had 4 daughters. This is in UP, and I had some 3-4 pairs of socks. So I gave her all my socks because these kids had no socks. It was all wet and cold, and I was like, going to fall sick. So you do whatever you can do. There are times that somebody needed Muzaffar needed money for a surgery, and they were going to sell their vehicle. And I'd been hearing about the surgery for a year, and I was like, why are you selling your vehicle? You can't sell your vehicle, right? Like, there'll be no money. How will your husband move around to travel? So yeah, we did put money together to help her. To answer your question, it does get overwhelming. It does get overwhelming. There are times when people ask you when they're not very honest. Also, you can sense the dishonesty, but of course you can't say it because only they know what they're going through, right? And no judgments on what they're going through. So I feel like, yeah, it's a Anjali. It gets onto you. It will get onto you, and it's normal for you to feel overwhelmed. It's normal because the list keeps increasing as you do more and more stories. I can think of 20 people I should call in this week. Actually, one more thing I'd like to say is, newsrooms are just so crazy that it's also important to like appreciate your colleagues. This is just a random thing, but like every week or 10 days, just like send an email or a call or a message to someone from the organization telling them that they've really helped you or they've done some fantastic work. Those kind of positive reinforcements also. I know it's a little bit digressing, but that helps in making sure you have a good equation with people. So yeah, it gets overwhelming, but you have to. I feel like shit. I'm going to be honest. I feel very, very bad. I feel really bad, and I wish I could just give them everything I have and just be like, oh my god. Yeah, you can, and there are times where you have to just like, yeah.
All right. Carlos Lewis has a question. This is regarding Quint. Does Quint encourage freelance journalists or submit stories, opinion articles? What is the process?
Write to oped@thequint.com, OPED at thequint.com. Please write it down. Carlos, yes. We also have something called citizen journalism, which are my reports, where if you have an idea, we invite you to be a reporter on the story and do the story for us. We edit. A lot of my reports are actually done very, very well, and we some solid my report for certain states. For example, we have this very, very solid guy in Ahmedabad who's as good as a reporter. He's brilliant. So that's a equation that has grown over time. So we have citizen journalism, we have OPEDs, we also have blogs. But I don't know if you know, but like the Quint let off like 40 odd employees. So we're very overstaffed. So I don't want to say that they will take anything. So try to make sure that your pitch is strong. If you want to run your pitch by me, reach out to me on Twitter. I can help you find it. Can definitely do that. We need to like my report at thequint.com, oped@thequint.com should have you covered.
All right.
Also write to editor@thequint.com if you want to.
All
One
right.
more email ID, editor@thequint.com.
Just an additional question, what Carlos Lewis has asked again. What is the process of a story reporting and writing? I think he's asking in terms of how do you go about writing. Right. Maybe I can add to it. Does it go through a process of gatekeeping? Do you have to maybe show it to a legal team, discuss it with the editor?
Sometimes we don't have a legal team, we have a legal affairs editor. His name is Vakasha Sajdev. Each January story that we have done on the chart sheet and how the whole in the police's conspiracy regarding the riots. My dog is barking nonstop. I don't ignore her. I don't know why she's barking. But sorry about that. That actually you have to reach out. You should. I'd rather reach out to my legal editor. Ki ek baar aap dekh lo story, just to make sure we're not messing it up. But of course, when you pitch an idea, there's a morning meeting every day where all the ideas are discussed. You have to tell them the source of your idea, whether it's a follow-up or it's an original idea. Every idea, whether it should be done Yeah, even regarding the RSS VHP thing, we had to, like I told them, we have to wait. Like they were sort of saying, Nikal, I was like, no, ruko. Matlab, so you in the morning meeting, that we're waiting for the response. They asked for a day. So all these things are discussed in the morning meeting. Everybody knows. All the editors know what you're discussing. There's this Zoom morning meeting which lasts for hours. And it's like, oh my god, when will this end? Corona has really changed our life. But you having that bad. I can't wait to really so much of that. So yeah, so a lot of that gate paper, a lot of that going through the idea, a lot of vetting of the idea, and the story eventually happens. Of course, my editor checked it, and if I need another, the legal editor, who's a very good friend of mine, also Vakasha Sajdev, super sharp. I asked him to have a look at it, so I do that myself also.
All right, all right. I think we are actually pressing on time, but I'll just quiz in one last question.
Sure.
What is your recommendation, especially to the students who are studying journalism and those who are maybe graduating across India? You have tons of students who are now planning to go in the field of journalism. What are the skills that you want them to maybe imbibe, learn, things that help them in this pandemic? It's a new normal we're going to live in.
If this question is pandemic specific, then I'll start with saying that 100% take safety seriously. I know that Goa is like Sushigado. That's the word I relate to with Goa. And you guys are very chill and not so much care in the world. And reporting is also very different in Goa. But if you're stepping out to report in Goa or anywhere else, anywhere else, any other state of India, wherever you guys are, please, please, please take safety very, very seriously. Take social distancing very seriously. Take those gloves, those shoes, whatever, the sanitizing of equipment after you come back home, making sure everything is outside, sanitize it with Colin or whatever before you bring it inside. Go straight to have a bath and have a wash so your family, doesn't get any of the cooties of corona. So yeah, first thing is take it very, very seriously. We do get disheartened when things don't happen as we want them to, because the officials are doing a lot more right now. Nobody is in their government offices. Landlines are generally not being picked up by anybody for good reason, right? We need to be home. So don't get disheartened. Try to find different ways to get a challenge. Try to find different ways of doing your stories. Reach out to senior journalists. Reach out to me. Reach out to whoever you want to. And take your professors and take advice from them as to I'm getting stuck here. How do I make this happen? Brainstorm an idea. This is a great time to find RTI. Use a lot of RTI because you're just sitting at home to post it. Central government is online, by the way, so you don't even have to step out of the house. File RTIs, do a lot of data searching, read a lot about what's happening, read a lot of strong pieces about what's happening. Learn from the way people are writing their stories. I'm constantly in awe of how people approach stories. Not so much in the West. I think that's very hyped when you keep talking about New York Times and this and that. I feel like India is doing some fantastic journalism. So yeah, pandemic specific be that, but otherwise, be active on Twitter, read the newspaper, be in touch with people. Don't hesitate in reaching out to experts. Don't hesitate in reaching out to anyone. You want to reach out to Ramchandra Guha, reach out to Ramchandra Guha. You want to reach out to a Lieutenant General Sood, you reach out to whoever you want. You as long as you're a journalist and you have a question, anyone should give you be an audience. Should make you an audience. So don't hesitate on any level to reach out to people for any stories whatsoever. So
Okay.
I think this should have you covered.
Yes, thank you so much, Aishwarya. Just to update you about the work for something around 50. Right now, confirmed cases are 951.
Oh shit!
And counting.
Is it because you've opened for tourism? Why are you guys opening for tourism?
Right question, wrong person. You're asking.
Yeah, but make someone pitch an idea from your college, from your college to do a story for the Quint for this. I will do everything I can in my limited power as a senior correspondent to get it approved. But why are they doing this? They were a green zone. We were so happy that. Why is this happening?
You asking this question, or you're
why?
various reasons. I think probably one of the reasons is the gates are open for everyone. Testing is not happening enough. It's very limited testing that's happening. Issues at political level, too many spokesperson saying two different things. So crisis management, a big question in Goa.
I think big question
So,
in I have to say this.
yeah,
Like I remember when I
yes,
heard about coronavirus, like initially, and they were like, yeah, what you have to do for corona is maintain social distancing and wash your hands and don't spit and wear a and what do you think?
so assured by our chief minister that the immunity of Goans is pretty strong. It's not to worry unless
What does
until
that even mean? Why you to say
exactly.
that? Like, even people in my office said that Indians have immunity. I said, what are you saying? We are a young population. I'm like, what does that mean? It means nothing. You don't know anything about corona. You get corona once, you can get corona twice. Like there is no vaccine. They're all trying different things, and we hope these scientists and so much money has been invested. Please, sometimes I feel so stupid. I'm so you are naughty right all this corona stuff is happening. I'm like, I'm not helping only over there. I feel very like I'm out of this huge party that they're having regarding what's going on.
True, true. On that note, Ashwarya, thank you so much. Thank you for such insightful, interactive session that we had with you. Thank you for having this time with us. I know you're a busy person. We even couldn't try to have a. No,
Like this
understood.
RSS story was only giving me sleepless nights. I'm
Not an issue. Just want to say that what you're doing is quite inspirational, quite courageous. We hope to see more stories from you. Thank you once again, and God bless you.
Thank you so much and take care. All of you. Please reach out to me if you guys ever need any advice or anything at all. I'm already in touch with some of your very, very bright kids on Instagram. So yeah.
All right. Okay. To our viewers, we're not just done it. I just want to inform you something. Okay. So we are done. We were in conversation with Ashwarya Iyer, telling stories no one else willing to tell. The next Web Talks is scheduled for 27th of June at 11 a.m. From a very national perspective, we'll be coming to a very regional arena. That is changing face of Goan media in regional language. The speaker for these talk would be Sandesh Prabhudesai, senior journalist and editor of GoaNews.com. The link is in the poster. I shall put the link in also so that you can directly register. Just a reminder again, you will be receiving an e-certificate. For that, we will be sending a feedback form at the end of our website. Probably that's on the 30th of this month. So that's all from St. Xavier's College. Thank you very much for tuning in. See you on 27th.